Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karen Dunspire and I am the Managing Director of this business here, which is called Elation. We're running a seminar this afternoon for people who are in sales leadership and sales management to help you all understand the most effective tools to lead a great winning team. Before I move on to the specific skills that you guys are going to need, I'm going to talk a little bit about the specific background of my business and exactly why I run the management sessions in the way that I do. So, in March 2009, when I set up Elation, I decided that I wanted to create a process whereby every business could properly understand exactly how they were able to get maximum performance. And the 3 pillars of successful selling are designed around the idea that in order to have the most strong sales operation, you have to have strength in 3 key areas. Area 1 is sales activity. This is about the specific communications that your customers see when they're looking to work with you. And we look at the quality and the quantity of those activities to make sure that they're going to get you the right results in your business. The second pillar is the sales process pillar. And the sales process pillar talks about the stages of the journey that your customer takes with you. We're understanding from lead generation to lead nurture, all the way through to account management, exactly how you're moving your customers through your business in the most effective way. And the final of the 3 pillars is the sales management pillar. And this is the pillar we're going to talk about today. And this is about understanding the tracking and measuring that you have in place to get really good sales performance. And it's also about understanding the leadership techniques that you will need to use. So let's first of all think about, what does a really great leader want to be? What does a highly effective team look like? We define that as having 6 key things. You need to be respected, and there needs to be respect within that team. They obviously need to be smashing their targets. No team's successful without that. And we also need to ensure that there's no conflict, that any challenging agendas are managed effectively, and that the people within that team are all communicating effectively with one another. A key one here is no micromanagement. In a business where the leader is required to micromanage their team to success, it's challenging for the leader and challenging for the team. So we want to create a situation where people are accountable for their roles as salespeople. Those high levels of accountability are something that you can generate in your team with the most effective practice, and we're going to investigate that today. And that will also bring about for you a really strong work ethic in your team. So there's 6 characteristics, if you like, of a high-performing team. And they're all listed there to ensure that we understand what we're looking at when we're defining great management. So how are we making this happen? What is the management process and practice that will allow us to get high-performing teams in the way we've defined them? I work according to a very simple 3-step process. First of all, we look to train our team members, to teach them what they need to know, to give them the effective tools and information that they need to perform to our expectations. We then need to reinforce that learning. We need to make sure that it's embedded and that the people are actually implementing those learnings within the team. And the third section of the sales management practice is to manage and track that performance. Let's look at these 3 stages in a bit of detail. Stage 1 is training. It's massively important that everybody within the team has very clear expectations of the competencies that are required, the behaviours that are required, and the expectations that you have of them as a team. All too often I hear businesses saying, oh well, I've got really experienced salespeople in my team, I don't need to train them. But the reality is, until you've taught them what you need in your business, what best practice looks like, and exactly how they can define that best practice with their behaviour, you're not going to get them selling the way that you want them to sell. So let's think a bit about this teaching. It's massively important that as a manager, you are considering what you need to teach your salespeople from the moment of induction through to performance development to make sure you maximise their skill set. And there's a very simple set of stages that you can go through to understand that. So I'll note them down here and we'll talk about them in a little bit of detail. We're going to be looking at what, when, how, where, who, and finally, why we're training them. You can use this 6-step process when you're looking to bring new people into the team, when you're looking to upskill an existing team, or even when you're looking to work with underperformance. And you should be creating a regular training strategy that will ensure that you're developing your people effectively. So first of all, let's think about the what. What specifically do your team need to know? What are the competencies that they have to do their job effectively? What expectations do you have of them? What targets do you have in place? What products and service information do they need from you? So you shape out a list of bullet points that will say to you, this is what I need to be teaching my team. Then you need to think about when you're going to teach it. Your training strategy needs to define, am I teaching this weekly, daily? Is it a quarterly session? How regularly do I need to be in front of my team training and developing them? Moving on from that, you need to think carefully about how. Are we going to do that in a one-to-one environment? Are we going to do it in a classroom environment? Am I going out into the field and meeting with people in the team and shadowing them in their role? How is that going to happen? And physically where? Will you be sitting at their desk with them, doing some one-to-one mentoring? Will you be bringing them into a classroom environment? Will this happen off-site in a booked training facility so that you can get real focus on the learning? What's the right environment to deliver that in? We also need to think about who specifically will deliver that training. Will it be yourself? Perhaps it'll be a colleague or a peer in your team. Maybe you'll need to outsource that. Where is the skill in your business that will allow you to deliver that training effectively? And the final thing, and actually in many ways the most important thing, is the why. So often we create a training program and we put no emphasis on what the objectives of that program is. So if I'm going to be teaching my team some questioning techniques, why do I want to do that? What do I want to get out of that? I may be saying that currently my conversion rate is 10% and I need to get that to 15%. That's the why. It's the objective for it. Now the key thing about this is that it's very difficult to measure a training program if you don't have an objective in place in the first place. So you can very simply use this 6-stage process to continually refresh your training program and make sure that you've got content that you can deliver for your team that is going to give them the competencies that they need to deliver for you. So now we've done stage 1. Let's think a little about the next stage. Here we're moving on to reinforcement. Now this for me is the most important stage of the management process. There's a very big difference between knowing something and doing it. Yeah? And very often we teach people a tip or a technique. We ask them for a specific piece of activity. They don't do it. We get really irritated, really frustrated with them and really fed up. Yeah? The reason that that happens is because they haven't processed that information into their long-term learning. It's not become a habit for them. It's not become a behavior for them. It's the constant reinforcement of thoughts and ideas that ensures that it can then become a practiced habit. If we think about driving, got any drivers in the room? Do you drive a car, sir? Very nice. You remember at one point when you were learning to drive, your car would kangaroo forward and you'd crunch the gears and it would all be a bit of a nightmare. Then at some point in your journey of learning, you can now drive to A to B and not really remember you did it, right? We've all done that. I'm not sure whether we shot any traffic lights, what happened on the way. That's because you practiced it again and again. It was constantly reinforced by doing it over and over, and it becomes a habit. It becomes completely subconscious, and we do it as one of our inherent behaviors. That's what we need to achieve in our sales team. We need to be constantly reinforcing the learning, getting them to practice that practical skill until it becomes inherent habit in them. And this is what we often fall down on. Statistics tell us that for every one piece of learning you give your team, you have to reinforce that 10 times over 21 days in order that they will make that a habit. And when we are asking our sales team to form a new habit, we're asking them to take on board a set of behaviors that will allow them to be successful. So reinforcement is the key to that. So let's have a look at how we might reinforce. It's important for us to understand that people learn in different ways. And encouraging people to have something in their long-term memory as a habit or behavior requires that we share that communication with them in a way that's really appropriate for them. So let's think first about the medium through which we communicate. there's 3 different ways that we can impart information to people. We can do that in a verbal or vocal way. We can do that in a written way. And we can do that in a visual way. And it is by a combination of those 3 things that we're able to really embed our learning. So let's imagine I've delivered my piece of training that we referred to earlier about questioning effectively because I want to increase my conversion rate. After that learning, I need to think about how can I verbally or vocally reinforce and repeat that. So I might be thinking about giving a refresher presentation in the next sales meeting, talking them through the learning again. I might be asking one of the team to give me a presentation on that learning so that they can verbally or vocally repeat that back to me. Need to think about written communication and reinforcing it in that way as well. So perhaps I'm writing an email with some bullet points to recap on the content. Perhaps I'm asking them to create a written revision sheet that repeats that learning. But I'm making sure that it gets written down and reinforced in a written way as well. So the third medium that you can use is a visual medium. Maybe I'm going to stick some nice posters up on the wall. Maybe I'm going to have a whiteboard and get people to note down all the times they've used that technique. I'm going to have something that's up in the public domain around the sales team that people can see and reflect on. It reinforces that learning. So that's the 3 different medium that you need to consider. Additionally to that, you also need to consider learning environments. Everybody learns in a different way and has a preference of the way they want to work. There's 3 different learning environments you need to consider. First is the individual, then is the partner, and then is the group. And again, we learn to different qualities depending on what learning environment we're in. We all have had a situation where you say to somebody in a team, I'd like you to create me a sales plan, please. Some of your colleagues might go off to their desk, spend some time Googling, do some research, and independently write that plan for you. Others of your colleagues might go, come on everyone, let's go into the training room, we'll all get some flip chart paper and some pens and we'll brainstorm this thing. That's the difference between different learning styles. And you need to give people an opportunity to reinforce that learning in all of those ways. So if I was thinking about individual learning, I might ask somebody to do a piece of online research. Say, would you go onto the internet and find 3 or 4 examples of good questioning that you've seen and reflect that back to me? If I'm thinking about partnership work, thinking about people who like to work, like to have someone to bounce off, they like to have that one-to-one environment in order to get their thinking working for them. I might be saying to them, let's do some role play, one-to-one role play. Or I might ask them to do some tag team calling, where one of them makes a phone call and the other one gives some feedback. Or I might do some coaching myself to get that one-to-one learning environment. And then finally, you've got the group environment. This is where there's a real interaction and a bouncing of ideas. So we might be saying, could one of the delegates from the training session please give a presentation in the next sales meeting? And we'll share this as a group. We might be saying, let's do a Q&A. So we'll get everyone who attended the training together and we'll share some ideas about how it's worked in our business environment, what's gone successfully. But if you're bearing in mind that for every piece of training you deliver, you have to reinforce that 10 times over 21 days. What we need from you then is to create a reinforcement plan that says, here's what my training strategy looks like, and over the coming 3 weeks, I'm going to use a combination of these 6 learning mediums and environments to reinforce that learning. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting that you give yourself 10 things to do. I would like you to be delegating out this work, to be thinking how you can use peer-to-peer learning, using colleagues within the team to support with these type of learning environments. But remember that you will only get an enforced habit in your team when you've reinforced and repeated your learning. So now you've told everybody what you need them to do. You've reinforced that learning, so you've made it a habit and a behaviour in them. Now we need to think about the next stage, and that is management. Now in every business, we have to manage our team, even the most high-performing team. Management is about tracking results, measuring results, communicating those results to the team, helping them understand when they're successful and when they're not. And that should be happening naturally. But sometimes we have a situation in a team where we have to deal with underperformance. And then there's a bit more proactive management that's required. Does anyone here have any familiarity with the skill versus will matrix? Have you ever seen this? Okay. This is a really, really powerful tool for understanding how effective your team are and how well they're performing. What it teaches us is that in order to be exceptional at a task, you have to have a very high level of skill and a very high level of will. So if I am very highly skilled in an area, I'm an expert in something, and I'm highly motivated to do it, I'm going to be grading 10 out of 10, and that job is going to get done exceptionally well. If at any point the level of skill or will begins to drop down, the quality of the delivery of that task reduces. So if I've got absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and I totally hate doing it, that job is not getting done very well and it's sitting down there. So we're thinking about all the performance in our team in relation to those two areas. If you have done an exceptional job of teaching and reinforcing, you will have a very high level of skill. And you should expect, in a team that have been well trained and the learning's been reinforced, you should expect that you will have a high level of skill up in the 8s, 9s and 10s. However, it is still possible that a highly skilled salesperson underperforms. And that is often to do with the level of will. And that level of will can be a lot of things. It could be a personal problem that you need to deal with in a much more sort of sensitive one-to-one way. It could be a lack of accountability, a lack of priority, a lack of ownership. It could be a selection of things that is reducing their drive or desire to do the task. And this is where proactive management comes in. This is where you have to have structured practices in place that will allow you to make sure that you're increasing their level of will and accountability. So let me give you some examples of these. The most important thing to think about here is that where you have a low level of will, the most effective way of driving that level of will up is through self-management. People need to be made accountable. They need to take ownership of their own results. You are not micromanaging them. You are asking them to drive their own performance. And there's various tools we can use for that. One I use very regularly with teams that I work with is a traffic light system, whereby you are saying green is absolutely excellent performance, amber is average, and red is poor. You give them really clear measures about what they look like, what success looks like. This is what you would need to achieve to be in the green. And then you ask them to achieve that. You set consequences in place. You notice with them, if you are in the amber for more than a period of 2 weeks, this will be the consequence. If you are in the red for more than a period of 2 weeks, this will be the consequence. Your requirement as an individual is to move yourself up that traffic light system and maintain your performance in the green. You take ownership of that as an individual. They then have a responsibility to manage themselves and they know what success looks like. There's another key one that you can use, is progress charting. Now bear in mind that how you use this depends on your business, your team, the style of leader that you want to be. You may decide that you want to do these management techniques on a very private one-to-one basis. You may want to do it in a team environment and have the entire business aware of the progress and the performance. But progress charting is a really good tool if you have a specific area of underperformance. So let's say my invisible colleague John, here, very handsome man, he's been underperforming on the telephone calls that he makes. Yeah, we need him to make 50 in a day. He's not achieving that. He's been making 20. We know that he has a very high level of skill. We've trained him on how to make the calls. We've trained him on our expectations. We've reinforced all of that learning. We're very confident that John's sitting up here, but he's still only making 20 calls. So there's a problem with his drive and his desire to do this task. What we're asking John to do is take ownership of his growth towards that target. So we give John a period of time. Might be 1 week, might be 2, might be 10. Totally appropriate to the business and the task. And we say to John, By the end of this progress period, you need to be making 50 calls every single week. At the moment, you're making 20. Every week, I want you to track and record the amount of sales calls that you're making, and I want you to report to me on the exact number at the end of the week. And all I want to see is progress. As long as the numbers increase every single week and I can see development, I can see improvement, I can see enhancement, I'm very happy with the situation. If I don't see progress, then we will need to have a conversation around that one-to-one and put in some performance plans around it. This means John is entirely accountable for his performance. There's complete ownership for it. He has to track it, he has to drive it, and he understands what's expected. And we're giving him a period of time to progress and develop. This style of management ensures that you don't over-labor yourself with tedious micromanagement tasks, but that you're also very well equipped to create accountability and ownership. There's one final tool that I'd like to share with you about performance management. This is a performance record that you can use in your team to give your team real accountability for how they're performing. So the first thing you do is think about, what are the competencies in your business? What do your sales guys need to be absolutely excellent at? And it might be an example of one of these. Maybe conversion rates that you need to have a certain place. You might need them to be controlling margin effectively and making sure that sales are a certain volume. Every business will have a different set of competencies. You would then say to poor John, who's getting a hell of a time at the moment, this is your current level of attainment. This is where you are at the moment. So your conversion rate is 10%. I need that conversion rate to be 15%. That's the target that you have in place. Set him attainment and target numbers for each of those fields, and then ask John to go away and create his own action plan. You'd like to see 3 bullet points in each box that will allow you to understand exactly what tangible activities John is going to do to bring about enhanced performance. And then you would ask him to come and share that with you, to discuss whether the quality is right, whether that you're confident that that's appropriate. And then you give John some time frames, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever is appropriate for him. And you give him ownership of taking away that task and ensuring that he delivers those actions in the way that you've agreed. In a situation like that, John is feeling less like he's being told what to do and more like he is responsible for his own success. Human beings don't like to be told what to do, particularly not grown-up ones. And so John is much more likely to take action to bring about an performance improvement, much more likely to have the desire and the will to do it if this is a plan that he has written that he believes is correct, than if it's something he is told to do that he feels is a challenge for him to implement. So they're just some tools around what you can do to create self-management for underperformance. Now, if you've put in place all 3 of these processes, you've trained your team really effectively, you've reinforced that learning, you've maximized the skill you have in your business, and then you've used self-management, tracking and measuring to bring up the level of will, you are going to find that you're going to have maximum performance in your team. You'll have an accountable team, you'll have a team who are smashing their targets, and there'll be no micromanagement involved. And so this is the most effective way of using the 3-step process in your business to create a really winning team. Thank you all for listening. I hope you've had a very lovely time.